Welcome to the Evangelical Eddie channel.
Want to have a conversation about Rhett and Link. If you're not familiar with Rhett and Link, they are YouTubers who have been around a while. And as far as in relation to my experience, they have been YouTubers that my kids have listened to and enjoyed, and we as a family have enjoyed them also because they've always been very clean. They're very entertaining, and they've always been fun to follow. However, recently, Rhett and Link both did separately, actually, they did them together, videos where they deconstructed their faith. And what that means is they have both left the Christian faith and they wanted to explain why and how it happened. And my concern is they have a huge influence on the Generation Z uh, and Y to some degree, the millennials, but especially the Generation Z. And with their popularity, that's going to inspire a lot of others to rethink their faith. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's good to challenge your faith, don't get me wrong. But what I'm concerned about is that I don't think they gave the other side of the story to their fans. And they also, in my opinion, maybe didn't go as far as they could have in looking into some things that they commented were the reasons they left their faith. So specifically, I want to look at Rhett's video first, and let's talk a little bit about it. Here's a little intro to what he had to say in his video.
I am telling my story of how I kind of got to where I am in terms of my belief and why I don't believe what I used to believe. The major shift for me occurred when I asked a question I had never asked. I've been very, very afraid to ask this question, and that was, what if I'm wrong? And what does it feel like to think this? It led to a few more questions that I'd always been afraid to ask myself. I'm gonna read these because I wrote them down. These are just a few of the questions I'd always avoided. If I don't want to believe that every religious experience of any person who is not a Christian is ultimately illegitimate, then why would I?
And so his point is if there's any experiences that happen in another religion, then they must be illegitimate. That's not entirely the Christian view of things. It's certainly possible for people in other religions to still have an experience of God or to experience some aspects of Christianity that are similar to Christianity in their religions. But he's taken a hard line on this, and I can understand why he's saying that, but he elaborates more about what he means. So let's listen to that.
If I don't have to believe that anyone who doesn't have a relationship with Jesus, i.e. the majority of people who have ever lived, are going to spend eternity being literally tortured in a fire, experiencing never-ending pain and suffering, then why, no pun intended, in the hell would I believe that? And if I can somehow accept the idea that hell exists because of God's holiness, why would I believe in a God who would choose to create that particular world where people have no choice whether or not they're going to be born, but then once they are born, if they don't adopt the correct understanding of God, he will punish them forever? Why believe in that God if I don't have to?
Okay, this is a fair question. And this is one I grappled with when I was younger. And honestly, I still, as an evangelical Christian, grapple with it today. But how you respond to this does play into whether you are a Calvinist or an Arminian Christian when we're talking about an evangelical response to this. That is, if God has predestined you to not believe, then that's what he's talking about. And by the way, he does mention in this video that he had a Calvinist or Reformed upbringing. So those types of issues, that's how he learned the answers to these questions, was through the Calvinist community he grew up in. As an Arminian, I want to touch on this, and for those of you that don't know the difference, Calvinist means you follow the teachings of Calvin ultimately. Arminius was someone who was opposed to some of the teachings of Calvin and taught a little differently some of the 5 points of Calvinism, if you want to call them that. We're not going to spend time on that here, but I just want to say that this difference comes into play with your answer, okay? And I'm going to talk about that right now. So the psalmist declares that the heavens declare the glory of God. This is in Psalm 19. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. So the point of that is that no matter where you live or what time in history you have lived or will live or are living right now, creation declares God's glory and reveals the knowledge to mankind that there is a creator. Paul expands on this in Romans 1:19-20. He says, God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So all of us are aware of God's presence. So this idea that, God's judging people because he's only revealed himself to a limited number of people in history, the majority aren't aware of his presence, is just not true. And now this would be a point that obviously all Christians would agree on. So we have what's known as general revelation. All right. That's the summary of that. You can look outside, you see the skies, you see the birds. I'm looking out, I'm seeing the grass. How can you not just glory in the fact that there's a creator of this creation, and just at least marvel at that at a minimum, to know that someone, something, whatever you want to use the term, obviously I would say God the Father, the creator, has made out all around us. It's obvious. It's a general revelation he's given to every human being. But what's interesting is Paul goes further and says that we not only know about God from that light from without, this general revelation, but we also know from the light within. Paul says when Gentiles, and those were people that were not Jewish believers, at the time that was the term used for that. They were usually Greeks or people from other non-Jewish backgrounds. Gentiles who do not have the law, but do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. This is Romans 2:14-15. So this is the next chapter after we talk about this general revelation. We're now talking about a revelation where it's a little more specific, and God actually reveals through your conscience and written on your heart what is right and wrong, and that there is a God, and so forth. So we all have a knowledge then of sin. We all have a knowledge we need forgiveness of the sin, and that we've offended this creator that we see, think about, and are aware is when we look out the window, aware is there. Paul finishes his chapter saying, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart by the Spirit, not by the written code. So it's not a written code that convicts us, but an inward conviction by the Holy Spirit. All right. So John 1:9, he says the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. So we have this light from without and this light from within that is given to who? To everyone. Again, John 1:9 says that light is given to everyone. So as an Arminian, I believe everyone is given this light externally and internally, and given an opportunity to believe in him. So when Rhett says that this unfair God that he no longer believes in doesn't allow the majority of people to actually believe in him, that's not true. Everyone has the chance. So that's an important point that I think somehow Rhett maybe never really was told, maybe was never explained to him, because again, he has that Calvinist community that he came out of it and influenced by. Now, not everybody embraces this light of revelation, so I'm not trying to be a universalist here. I recognize that most people will not accept this, okay? Why is it then that everybody doesn't respond to this light? Well, Jesus tells us in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, 18-21, whoever believes in him is not condemned. Whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. So don't get me wrong. I still believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him, as it's stated. But I just wanted to make sure you understand that I believe everyone has the chance to do that. Okay? So the question is then, is the general revelation sufficient? Well, we say faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ. And that's in Romans 10. And how then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? So it's written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. It kind of works backwards into saying you need to hear the message to be able to receive it. But it seems that some people actually do hear this message without hearing it specifically. You hear you hear stories about, I've read and heard many about Muslims who have had dreams about Jesus, and when people come and talk to them, they say, yes, I had a dream. So, dreams would be a way that God reveals himself without someone having to specifically hear it. We see these dreams in Old and New Testament. We hear many stories of Jesus speaking to people in dreams today, but there's examples of God speaking in dreams to Joseph, the son of Jacob, Joseph, the husband of Mary, in the New Testament, Solomon, there's others in Daniel and so forth that God reaches people through dreams. There's special revelation where people have visions. Paul had a vision on the road to Damascus in Acts 9, chapter 3. God offered this special revelation, not the general one of creation, but this special one to Paul supernaturally in this vision. And there's other examples of God speaking through visions to Paul and his companions in Acts 16. So that God can definitely communicate to his people through visions, and we see this, today people talk about having visions. You can always question it and may think they're crazy, but I'm telling you, there's enough stories out there that I'm convinced there's more to it than we can fully understand, and we know that it's God's means of reaching people. The key is in 2 Peter 3:9, and this is a big verse for Arminians versus in contradiction to Calvinist view of things. God says he does not want anyone to perish, but he seeks those who seek him. He mentions that in Luke 19 and James 4. But this idea that he doesn't want anyone to perish is important to us, because if he doesn't want anyone to perish, then he must be making a way to give everyone an opportunity, right? And that's what I'm referring to at the beginning. So the key is that God will find a way to reach every person with the light of truth with a special revelation. The main way is by Christians sharing the good news, but it's not the only way. And remember, we're all born to be condemned. The rejection and despising of the truth and light seals that condemnation. God does everything required so that we might be reconciled to him and not be condemned. Those who genuinely seek God with their whole heart will find him and be reconciled to him. A good question that could have been further asked by Rhett is, well, what about this special revelation reaching people before Christ was born? Because, again, he's referring to the majority of people of all time not receiving this revelation. So how were people saved then before Christ arrived? How did they receive special revelation? We know that the Old Testament people had the lights of creation and conscience like we do, but they only had knowledge of the light of Christ in types and shadows, is a term we use. We have the luxury of looking back at the cross today. They looked forward to the cross. Abraham looked forward to the promise of the Messiah, and he was saved. We actually read that in the New Testament, John 8. He says, your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. So in the Old Testament, they were looking forward to Jesus coming, and that faith in that future Messiah gave them that special revelation. So thankfully, the revelation is fuller for us today, now. In Galatians 4, we're told the fullness of time has come. Know this Redeemer Jesus, who has come in fullness. The time has come. Okay, so, an extra question I would have that wasn't asked also is, how does special revelation reach people who can't understand the gospel message? So we've talked about those who lived before Jesus was born and those who lived after but have never heard the gospel, such as a remote tribe in Africa. Again, you'll see missionaries go into Africa, they find this tribe, and amazingly, the tribe has 7 commandments of the 10 that we're aware of that Moses gave the Israelites. So there is something written on the hearts of man that they come up with this moral, internal, special revelation that is written on our hearts. We see examples in the Bible of babies. There's a feeling that babies are not condemned because they have not had the opportunity to hear this message. If you look at David in 2 Samuel, he had a baby die, and he said that he would go to be with his dead son in heaven when David himself died someday. That baby couldn't receive the special revelation by understanding or acceptance, yet David affirms the baby went to heaven when it died. You'll hear a lot of evangelicals call this an age of accountability for children, where they reach a certain age where that light from without and within starts to convict their conscience. Those with serious mental handicaps would never reach this age of accountability, likely. So we know there are many levels of mental handicaps. Some are able to seek God and receive salvation in this life, but for those that don't have that ability, it wouldn't be a stretch to believe that they are likely covered with the same grace as young children are. So again, people in all times are given general revelation. It appears the same is true for special revelation. And it's clear that there's only one way to be saved. Jesus says he is the only way to the Father in John 14:6. And Peter repeats this in Acts 4:12 when he says there is no other name by which men can be saved. We see in Revelation 7:9 that people from every tribe and nation will be represented in heaven. There were many tribes in existence in history prior to Christ's appearance 2,000 years ago on earth that never heard the gospel, and of course there are many still to this day. Yet they will all be represented in heaven. So obviously, people from those different tribes and nations in the past and even in the future and those existing today, there's enough of them that have responded to the message that they represent those tribes in the future. They'll be represented in heaven.
I still think that belief in God is very reasonable. I think that the idea that the universe is ultimately purposeful, it's headed towards some ultimate purpose, not only is that comforting, but it kind of feels, again, it feels right to me when I just look at the history of the world and where, but I don't know it to be certain, and I don't know anything about this source or this God that might be behind all this, and I'm kind of beginning to think that I don't know if you are supposed to know a whole lot about it. So I would call myself a hopeful agnostic, meaning I don't know, but I hope. I hope there's something.
So I don't know about you, but I find hope in Rhett's calling himself a hopeful agnostic. I've been there. I was there back in college. I know that feeling where, as he says, it makes sense. It feels right that there's still something there. So this general revelation, the heavens declaring the glory of God, the skies proclaiming the works of his hands, he's seeing that. Rhett can't help but still know there's something there. He's not sure now what it is. So whether he's had that revelation from within or not, I mean, it sure seems like he has. He was so involved with the Christian community. I don't know how he could not have come face to face at some point with the decision for Christ. This could get into the whole conversation of can you lose your salvation or not? And again, I don't want to get off track here, but that would be good for another video to talk about. But the key is, he is affirming general revelation. He is affirming there's something out there. What he's just saying is what it is specifically has not been revealed enough for us to make a decision. I think, and I have good feelings about that, he is going to eventually come back around to this understanding of who this God is, that this God is the creator, the Father, the part of the Trinity, the Christian view of God. So let's continue listening.
And a question that I've gotten from some people who are close to me and love me is, what do you think happens after you die? I don't know. I'm reasonably certain that you don't burn in hell because you were intellectually curious and honest, to put it bluntly, because you've got this moral lawgiver. There may be a moral lawgiver. I'm not saying that God doesn't exist, but I think that it's a much more natural and organic process than there's a book, I read it, and now I know what to do. I think that's why those core qualities of what makes a human good exist in cultures everywhere. You find a culture in the middle of the Amazon that's never been exposed to the gospel or any sort of religious system outside of what they believe. Are they gonna think that murdering is great? Probably not. They didn't need Hammurabi or Moses to tell them that.
So did you catch that? Rhett is actually affirming that there is a conscience written on the heart. So he is actually affirming Romans 2, what Paul was saying, that the Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law and are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. Remember, this was Romans 2, 14 to 15. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness. So in this case, he's talking about the idea of murder being against the conscience of the heart. Now, we all know there are and have been tribes of people, cultures who did believe murder was okay. There were cannibals in the Amazon and places like that. So this isn't to say that every culture embraces that moral law that's written on our hearts. There's many that reject it and fight it and resist it, and that goes for also the drawing when God's drawing you to receive him and accept Jesus as Savior. That resistance happens also. So I don't agree with him entirely that you will never find that situation, but I do agree with him that in general, most cultures agree stealing is bad, lying is bad, murder is bad, cheating on your spouse is bad, and so forth. I mean, those all are pretty universal for the most part, and that's because of this law written on your heart. All right, let's continue on.
Are you happy with the label that you've given yourself of hopeful agnostic? I mean, is that, are you happy with that?
I don't know how to answer. I'm happy with it.
I mean,
it's just where I'm at. I am happy. I am happy.
Is it a destination? I guess is.
For me, I am open to revelation from God. Like I haven't it's like, listen, there's some things.
Should I step back?
There's some things that I don't think I'll ever believe again. Like I'm not ever gonna believe that the earth is 10,000 years old. Like that car left the garage a long time ago. I don't think I can have a worldview that doesn't embrace the reality of evolution, that every living being on the earth is related to every living being on the earth. And I actually think that's beautiful, even from the perspective of there might be a creator. And I know that I could go into the desert or I could go into the office and have a crazy religious experience that all of a sudden I come back and I'm like, I got something for you. And I'm not closing myself off to that. I'm not some pure naturalist. Because listen, if my story represents anything, it's that I'm willing to change my mind.
So that's an important point that Rhett is acknowledging. He's willing to change his mind. You know, he was asked earlier from Link if he felt this is a destination. This is obviously not a destination to him. He still feels he's learning, he's looking for revelation, open to revelation from God. Well, if he's open from revelation from God, he's going to get it because God doesn't give up on us. God will keep reaching for you as long as you're reaching for him, right? Those who seek will find and so forth. And it's a positive thing to me that he's still open. You know, we talked about how God does give revelation to people, special revelation through dreams, through visions, through other people and conversations, and all those are options for him, obviously. So as long as he's open, I know and I trust and I pray that God is going to reach him. Okay, let's wrap this up and hear his final words on this.
I had a faith that was so solid. This was so deep. This wasn't this Sunday morning thing, man. This was a lifestyle. This was in my blood. And I let it go because I did not believe it to be true. I'm gonna follow truth wherever it leads without fear of uncomfortable conclusions. And if that means that, oh, and you know what? You're gonna have an encounter with God that is going to send you to some new place or send you all the way back, then so be it. But the thing I don't want to do is I feel like the curiosity and the openness that characterizes my life right now is something I don't want to let go of. And I don't want to be, in fact, a quote from Ravi Zacharias that I used to say, I'm going to butcher the quote, but he essentially talked about, you don't want to be so open-minded that your mind is like a sewer, just letting everything in. Eventually you got to bite down on something. So I recognize that you just can't be passive, but I actually, I don't know, I have had some experiences and it's come to some conclusions, but I'm not ready to share all that at this point. But I would say that if anything, it's just sort of confirmed the direction that I've been going, kind of away from the faith of my childhood. That's my story.
Well, that's his story. And what's important, again, is that he says he's going to follow truth, wherever truth leads him. And I trust that if he is indeed going to follow truth, he will realize that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And that's what we're praying for. And I just wanted to, share my thoughts on what I heard in this this podcast of his spiritual deconstruction. Now, I will tell you that if you listen to the entire hour or two of this deconstruction, what I've summarized here probably sounds pretty positive, but if you're a Christian, it's very depressing to listen to this guy fall away from the faith, a faith that was very near and dear to him. He was not somebody that just, went on Christmas and Easter. He wasn't a Sunday-only Christian, as he said. It was part of his life. He was embedded in the Christian community. And for those of us that are in the Christian community, to picture ourselves going through what he did, it's hard to picture. Now, again, the questions he faced and struggled with, I had those same questions, same struggles. He even touches on old earth and evolution and those types of things. I'll discuss those in another video. I went through many of those same challenges. So I fortunately went through all that before I got into a Christian community, an evangelical community. I can't imagine finally facing those questions after being in a Christian community with my wife and my kids, and then pulling away from all that. That's rough. So we need to pray for him, pray for his family, and just pray that his heart will be open and ready to receive Jesus when he does reach back to him again with his hand to grab it and embrace Jesus as his Savior once again. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments below in the comments section. I'll surely get involved with engage your comments. Thanks again for listening to this video, and look forward to seeing your comments below. And click and subscribe if you would like to follow me and hear more videos on this topic. I'll be making more videos on Rhett and Link and their spiritual deconstruction. And like this and share it if you would, and keep the conversation going. Thanks a lot, and God bless.